Esther?
Yes.
So,
All right.
all right.
Fun.
We're alive. All right, we're back. Sorry about missing everybody last week. We just had a thing come up where most people were going to be busy, and so we decided to take a week off. I hope it was good. I hope I didn't catch you too much off guard. And Jenny's watching another Bible study already, so and that's
Traitor. What happens when you get refreshed on Facebook and hope that the right thing comes up?
That's where she's got to keep herself entertained too, and she has to listen to me enough. So I don't blame her at all. Esther is a very interesting book, and I just want to talk about some things to get us into really an overview, because it in some ways it won't make sense unless you understand some certain things. So let's talk about just kind of where Israel was at this time, and what was going on. Esther is another book that's written in the time frame of the Judges. Okay, so you got to kind of understand that. I know for the longest time it never made sense to me. I read the Bible linear. I'd go just from book to book to book, and you think, okay, and then you're going, well, I thought I read that story back here, and I thought I read, and you got to understand that a lot of these stories are all happening at the same time or at similar times. So what was going on in Israel during that time? Do you remember anything that we've talked about, especially talking about what was happening in the book of Ruth and those things?
There was a famine.
Well, that was specific to Ruth. I want to talk about in general what was going on with Israel.
It was the divided kingdom.
Well, we're kind of coming there. I forgot to print that page out. I should. Yes, we're kind of into that. Israel, you've got a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. And the northern kingdom is Israel, and the southern kingdom is Judah. Okay, so there's that going on. But the big problem that was going on with Israel is Israel would get it right for a little while. In other words, have their relationship with God right, and then what would happen?
Then they sin and fall apart and start all over. And they change judges, and it seems like it depended on the judge.
Well, I think that it depended on the judge how things were resolved and reconciled.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right. What would happen is they would listen probably to the communities that they were in. We're talking about everything else. Why was this a problem? And that's kind of a general question. It's probably not a good question to ask you. Let me do it like this. I gave all you guys a map. Okay? I want you to look at this map, and I'll show this to you. You can find this online. I'll hold this up. Oh, let me get my finger off of it. I'll hold this up for a second.
Back up.
This is called the map of the Fertile Crescent. Okay? Is that a good pick? Okay. This is called the map of the Fertile Crescent. It gives you the area. Now, that green area in the map is the Fertile Crescent. Do you know what that really is?
Modern day.
No, not modern day. This is about the promise that God made to Abraham.
Okay.
Okay? Mm-hmm. If you look at this map and you see this Fertile Crescent, and really if you just kind of drew a line all the way from one border to the other, that's what Israel should have been. That's what God intended when he promised Abraham. Okay? Now, you can look up in the little corner of the map and you can see what all the modern day countries are, right? And if you look down at the bigger map, you see you start to recognize some of these names, like the Amorites and the Persians and the Medes and the Kassites and the Hittites. And you see where some of this other stuff. Well, think about this for a second. Why is all this happening? It's because when Israel left slavery and God told them to go into a community, if you will, go into a place and destroy it, they were supposed to destroy it. It was supposed to be gone. Now people hear that and they go, well, gosh, Rick, God's a mean.
That's a teeny
Nice of
tiny
me,
little
killing, reading the Bible, you know.
Yeah, especially the Old Testament, you read a lot of that. But this is why this was happening. It's because these communities that they would go into, okay, like Edom is a community that ultimately got destroyed. These communities that they would go into were communities that worshipped other gods, that didn't honor or weren't willing to serve the Lord God, serve Yahweh. And so what happens if you intermingle? What happens if you put a Catholic and a Protestant in the same house?
Friction.
Yes.
I'm right.
Okay. What happens if you put a Christian and a non-Christian in the same house?
Same thing.
Okay. So really what this was is God was trying to clear out a space where the Jews, the Hebrews, the Israelites could flourish and grow. Now, if you look at the map, you would think, wow, if they did this, if they listened to God and did exactly what he told them as they were going through and spent that 40 years getting to the promised land, and they destroyed the people that they were supposed to destroy, and the people that were left honored and worshiped God and glorified God, this whole area would be green now, first off. Okay, it's turned into a desert because of some of the things God has done for that to happen. But the other thing is, look at all the wealth that's in that area. Look at all that. Look at all the modern day places. You've got Syria, you've got Jordan, you've got Saudi Arabia.
Israel is that little?
Israel is that little.
It's tiny.
Israel is tiny. It's tiny, and here's the thing: half of Israel is Palestine. Okay,
the
so
widest part is like 42 miles.
yeah. Anyway, but if you think about that, then God's message would have been able to flourish even more. His love and His grace would have been seen even more. But what happened was God said something. God said, do this. And man said, okay, I'll do it my way. That's really what happened. Okay? God said, destroy them all. Remember when Samuel told Saul, we just read this if you're reading through the Bible. Samuel told Saul, go in and you're supposed to destroy the town and destroy everything. And Saul does not do that. He kills everybody. He leaves the king alive. He kills all the people. He takes all the wealth. He takes all the animals. He takes everything else. And then his excuse is, well, I brought them back so I could give good offerings to God. That's not what God wants. God wants our obedience. He wants us to listen to Him and to act not our way, but His way. When we do it our way, you get conflict. When we do it our way, you get a mess. So you're putting all these people together, and we're going to find here in this story of Esther, again, you've got the Jews versus two other tribes of people. And they're struggling to survive. What's the importance, again, of the Jews? Why are they God's chosen people?
Because he chose them.
Why? Okay, what did he choose them for? You're right. It's because he chose them. What did he choose them for? To communicate his message to the world. They were chosen to bring that message of God's love to the world through their relationship with Him.
But why but why them? Why not the
Yeah.
next ones up?
Right.
Because he said he chose them.
Because he chose them.
Just because.
Because he
Because
chose
he's God.
because he chose Abraham. You got to go all the way back to Abraham.
Because
Abraham's the father.
Okay.
Where's Abraham from?
Cush.
No, you're thinking of Ur of the Chaldees. Is what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Abraham is from Hebron. That's where he was born. Hebron. What does that sound like? Hebrews.
Yeah. Where is it though when there is somewhat of an explanation where God chose his people because they were the most stubborn and
Well, he says that.
Yeah.
You're a stubborn and stiff-necked people.
yes,
He says that, but that's not. He still chose them. He chose Abraham, and then it went from Abraham through Lot and all them to Isaac, and then Jacob and Esau. And because Jacob and Esau couldn't get along, there was deception there. That's where all the problems started. That's why you have all these other places, the Amorites and the Hittites, and we're going to learn about the Amalekites in here, and we're going to learn about the Jebusites. Well, the Amalekites and the Edomites, and I think it's also the Hittites, are all descendants of Esau, and they're all against Israel. They're all against Israel. Who's Israel? That's Jacob's group. That's from Jacob's 12 sons. Okay? But God chose them for a purpose, and the purpose was to communicate his message, the message of his love to the world, to be those examples of what it meant to have this intimate relationship with him. They were to be the messengers. That's why they were chosen. That's the job they were given.
A lot
Well,
of a lot of people say, "What do you mean they're chosen or like they're above?" No, they're just supposed to spread the good news.
But that's another thing that I was thinking, that it was because they weren't a powerful people, because they were nothing, and he would get the glory from.
Well,
It's like to confound the wise type of thing.
yes.
Do you know?
If he chose the Egyptians, what would that be?
Yeah.
The Egyptians were one of the most powerful groups when the Israelites were starting to be formed. They ruled the world. Well, actually, it was the Babylonians before that, the Sumerians. I'm sorry, the Sumerians. What if he chose the Sumerians to bring that message?
Yeah.
It wouldn't have meant much.
He wouldn't have
But you start with Abraham, and you go through Isaac and Jacob and Esau, and then you go through Jacob's 12 sons, and by the time they get to Egypt, how many of them are there? How many Jews are there, or how many Hebrews, or how many of Israel are there by the time they get to Egypt the first time?
70
70. There's only 70.
when they leave.
7 or 70?
70.
Yeah.
By the time the famine hits and Joseph's already in Egypt, and he's interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, and he's the second most powerful man in the world at the time, and he brings his family from Canaan to, again, Canaanites who have a problem with Israel. He brings his family from Canaan, and Pharaoh loves Joseph so much he puts the Israelites, or the Jews, they weren't Israelites yet, he puts the Jews in Goshen, which is the most fertile land in all of Egypt, and allows them to farm and just gives them run of Egypt because of Joseph, and they grow from 70 to 434 years later. There's 1.5 million approximately in 434 years. Now there's more Jews than there are of even Egyptians. The Pharaoh then at the time was getting scared because there was more Jews, and if they'd all come together, he felt that the Egyptians were going to get overrun. And so that's why he put them into slavery, and that's why he started making things hard. That's why he started persecuting them, to hold them down. See, if everybody had just listened at the start to what God had said to Abraham and gotten along, this land here from the Mediterranean Sea all the way over here to the Euphrates, all this land would be green and it would be theirs. And if you look at the little map up here, they would be far and above the wealthiest people in the world. Because right now, if you look in Saudi Arabia and Jordan and that area, and Kuwait, and that's where the most wealthiest people in the world are. Why? Oil. You think God knew?
Yeah.
When I was in Israel 15 years ago now, or more, they had found a huge oil deposit under the Dead Sea. And trying to find out how they could have that for wealth. But, you do think about that.
So anyway, so this is what we got the history for, and this is why you're starting to see the conflict. Now we fast forward to the middle of the time of the Judges, and you're about, I want to say you're in the 500 range. I'm just giving you general terms. Silly me, I had done a timeline chart for you guys. I'll bring it next week about from the time the kingdom split to give you an idea. I got caught up in these other things today, and I just forgot to print it. But we're around 500 BC, so still Christ is still out there a ways. Okay, his arrival still isn't come, but he's being prophesied about. But Israel is struggling. Why is Israel struggling? Because they didn't do originally what God had said by destroying this. Let me say it this way: by destroying the sin that surrounded them, so they could flourish in righteousness. And so they were dealing with sin. And this is why they had their setbacks. They were dealing with sin. Now that's what prompted this. You guys got this little packet. And I emailed it to a couple people. It's called 10 Lies Believers Need to Pay Attention to. And I wanted to, it got me thinking about what are the things that have permeated believers today, okay, that are keeping us distracted and keeping us from being the people that God has purposed us to be. And there are some definite things that are out there. And you're going to read a couple of these things, you're going to go, wow, Rick, you're being a little radical here. And I adapted this from an article on crosswalk.com. Okay, which is a good Christian, it's an online magazine. It was a magazine for a long time. Now it's just an online magazine. But it's based on Scripture, and I think it gives us some things we need to think about, because a lot of this has permeated the church today. And I've been to a lot of different churches. I've been involved in a lot of different ministries, and I see some of this as an underlying thread. I'll talk about a couple of these things. The first thing it says is it's all about you. How many people do you know today that are doing something and it's you're sitting in my seat, or this is my ministry, or those kind of things. Mine. This is I'm serving God, but this is my thing to do. You got to go do something else. I had a lady that was at a church that I served at a long time ago, and she was very good at what she did, and she wouldn't allow anybody else to help her, and it got to the point where she was sometimes offensive about it to other people, and it would cause people to just walk away because they couldn't help at all. And she wasn't open to any new input or new ideas or anything else. That's not what ministry is about. It's not about establishing your kingdom. Everything we do, let me say it this way very clearly, everything we do is about honoring God first. The things that I do, putting these things together, the sermons that I and the Bible studies that I put together, yes, I give them to you guys, but I'm doing this first. It's my first offering to the Lord. And there's sermons I've preached, I'm looking at people, I'm going, wow, man, I missed the mark. It just seems like it because they're all like, but I say, God, this is between me and you first. And it invariably comes back that somebody said, man, that just really spoke to me or something. But you know what? It's about first and foremost our relationship with God. But especially I see so many things where we're making it about us. And today in this me society, it is all about me. It's my wants, my rights, my. And that's a lie. You see, that's a lie. And this article references Jeremiah 12:5, which says, if you've run with the footmen and they have tired you out, then how can you compete with the horses? If you fall down in the land of peace, how will you do in the thicket of Jordan? And what they're talking about is when you're making it about you, you're not going to have the things that you want or need to ultimately love others and reflect God's grace to others. Now here's another lie that we all, especially today in this day and age, a little overspending won't hurt you.
Put it on the credit card.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. They're talking about, I just heard a thing on the news. This one went off, didn't it? The internet dropped out. It's been doing that.
I'm trying to.
It's okay. It'll restore. And we're just going to keep recording, and you can just post when it comes back up that it'll that we'll upload it again. I heard a thing on the news just the other day that credit card spending is
way
up, and the whole thing is usually they see in the first quarter of every year you see a drop in some of not only the spending but some of the credit card gets paid off. It didn't drop this year. In fact, it elevated, and more people are living. It's because I want what I want and I want it right now.
Some of that is, but some of it's the economy.
Well, and some of it is the economy too.
I mean, when you have to pay so much for gas and for food has gone up sky high.
It's outrageous.
It is.
And
It's outrageous.
some people, they put it on the credit card because they have families and,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
They can't pay it off. Yeah.
And you hear those things. If I just paid the minimum payment of my credit card, I'd been paying it for 47 years.
Yeah.
That's hard. It's hard. So we just, I'm not saying don't use a credit card. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, like the principle that Bonnie was telling us about before this, think about your decisions. Think about your choices. Don't just do because everybody else is doing. Make a wise choice. Here's a big thing. Righteousness isn't as important as it used to be. It's okay. A little bit of sin's okay in the church, right? It's okay if the pastor's having an affair. It's okay. It's only one affair. He's not sleeping with 2 or 3 different women. It's only one. And she comes to the church. You see, but there's things like that go on. And we a little bit of sin is accepted. We accept a little bit of sin in our leaders. And I'm not pointing anybody out. I'm saying across the board. Across the board, we're going to accept arrogance, we're going to accept pride, we're going to accept low morals, we're going to accept all kinds of things. And you hear story after story about some leader of our country that's either in court or going to jail or disgraced or somehow. No, our behavior should reflect what we believe. You see, and our behavior, especially as Christians, especially as believers, reflects on God. Now here's one that I loved in this article, number 4. You can say whatever you think. So many people, well, I'm just being honest with you. I'm just telling you, what God told me. I'm not telling this to hurt you, and then as they're cutting your heart out, that's not what it is. I love the last line in what this person wrote. Maybe we should learn to shut our mouths rather than spewing the defiling vomit of anger on those in our path. Sometimes it's better to, as all you moms here told us, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. It's a free country. You can do what you please. A good job provides the money and happiness you need. These are all lies that we're dealing with. You can watch a movie or TV without agreeing with the message. Now people are saying, Rick, you're condemning movies, you're condemning TV. No, I'm saying understand the message. understand the message, and understand what you're watching. Here's the one that I love. You don't need to discipline your children. Children today are running wild. Sorry. I'm sorry. They are. And I'm not saying in general. There are children that are disciplined. There are children that do have live by the standards they're given. And if they violate those standards, they deal with the consequences. See, this is the same thing with Israel. Okay? Israel made choices. Okay? And when they made the choice to serve themselves well, I don't want to kill everybody, or I'm going to keep this for myself. I'm going to keep this for us because we need the money, or it's going to make us more wealthy, or I'm going to keep it not because God said don't keep it, but because then I can use it as a sacrifice. I can use it to honor God. And what would happen? They would get disciplined. They would get overrun by the community. It would distract them, and they would be separated from God. God would withdraw he would step back from them. And I know that's a bad way to say it. I'm not saying that he pulled himself away, but man, it was they suffered the consequences of their decision. It's the same thing that I learned. I learned this at 16 years old. I was 16 years old when I had my first girlfriend. Oh, and I was, you know how dumb teenage boys are when they first fall in love.
Girls too.
Well, I can't talk about girls because I ain't one. But I know boys are stupid. And I used to tell my girls, boys are stupid, throw rocks at them. Okay, but I was in love with this girl, and I just got along so well with her family, and it's probably because my family life was challenging, to say the least, as a teenager. And one day they always had me over for dinner, and one day I was in the kitchen after dinner cleaning the dishes with the father, and we were just talking like you do and doing the chores. And we got done, and he was standing there, and he leaned back against the wall, and he says, "Rick, I got to talk to you." And of course, you know, when you hear that, you're going, "Oh gosh, what did I do? I'm in trouble. I messed up." And he says, "Son, I need to tell you something. And this is what I want to tell you." He says, "I want to tell you this. You can't get somebody a little bit pregnant." And I said, and of course I was embarrassed. He was just being honest because he had 3 daughters, and the oldest was my girlfriend. And what he went on to explain, he says, "Look," he says, "we love you, and if something happened, we're not going to reject anybody. But you got to understand, there's consequences for every choice you make. And if you get her pregnant, if something happens and you get her pregnant, you're going to be obligated for the rest of your life to this child." And it was a great lesson for a 16-year-old kid who didn't know which way was up. But it's that kind of thing, and it's that kind of lesson that we need to. The kids need to be taught that there are consequences for your actions. I'm not going to go over all these. I just thought it was really appropriate because I thought it paralleled so much what we're talking about with Israel. Israel made choices, or the Jews made choices, and it caused them to live in desperate in a situation. Now, there's a big technical, theological term. It's called diaspora, and you might hear people refer to that. Do you know what that term means? And it refers a lot to Israel. Diaspora means you're dispersed from your homeland. And this is what ultimately happened to Israel. How did it happen? Well, ultimately they were taken into captivity and pulled away. Almost all of them were pulled away. And now they've been coming back over hundreds and thousands of years. They've been coming back, and Israel itself is starting to thrive, but it's thriving in this little place that not where God had intended. He intended in them to have the whole area. Okay? There's another term I want to talk about, because we're going to talk about this a lot in here, in this message to Esther. Well, let me do this first. How many of you know the story of Esther? And then we'll talk about a couple more terms. You familiar with the story of Esther? Mm-hmm. Esther's a queen, right?
Right. Well,
Esther was a
she
Jew.
didn't start out that way.
How did she start out?
She was a
She
Jew.
was Mordecai's niece.
Yeah, so she was a Jew.
Yeah.
Taken into captivity. And because Queen Vashti wouldn't.
Oh, wait, so you're already ahead.
Okay.
Why is she associated with her uncle and not her parents?
Her parents are dead.
Yes. So she's an orphan. Okay, so not only is she Jewish, but she's an orphan. So she's already got 2 strikes against her. Why? Because they're in Persia. Look at the map. Look at the map and see where Persia is. It's on the other side of the Persian Gulf. If you wanted to draw a line to where Israel is today and where Persia is modern day Iran. Okay? Persia is modern day Iran. So they're as far away from where Israel is as they can be, right? They've been taken away from Jerusalem. They've been taken away from the capital, from this area where they were intended to flourish. Now, Jerusalem wasn't even a city then, or if it was a city, it was a small city. It wasn't the capital yet. But they've been taken way away from their homeland. Okay? So she's not in her homeland. Neither is Mordecai, her uncle. They're in captivity.
Again.
Once again. Why? Because of sin. Not because of, I'm not saying Esther and Mordecai were the sin. It's because they're in captivity because their community had turned their backs on God once again. So God was, they were suffering the consequences. They were worshiping idols again. They had Asherah poles built in their synagogues. All these things that all these other things they used to worship. It wasn't in line with what God had instructed them to live by in like the 10 Commandments. Anybody remember what the first commandment is?
Love thy God.
Honor, right? Go ahead. Honor the Lord your God. Just honor the Lord your God. That's it. That's the first thing. And we don't get that right. If we could get the first commandment right, then maybe we move on to the second one. Interesting thought, right? It's just like if we got the love thing right, then maybe we could move on to some of the other stuff that God really has for us. But we don't get the love thing right. Well, Israel had a problem with the honoring God thing. And when they got it right, then they would get back and there would be peace in the land, there would be prosperity for a while, and then they would get full of themselves and start to worship other idols and all those things. So, go ahead.
Didn't the people that surrounded them have like a hatred for them or a jealousy or something?
Well, the hatred was twofold. One, it's because these stubborn and stiff-necked people were very clear about that they were God's chosen. Okay? Now, I joke about it, I quip about it, that I'm God's favorite. Okay? Because I am, but that's a whole other story. Okay, but there you go. Atta girl, Marilyn, I love it. But Israel was very clear about that they were God's favorite. And they would hold it up in everybody's face. Now, when God was with them and they were taking Jericho and they were overrunning the land and chasing out the Canaanites and doing all these things that they were supposed to be doing, yes, everybody knew the power of God. And it wasn't Israel that was it wasn't the Jews that were getting the glory. It was God. When they would go in, like when they went into Jericho, what did Rahab tell the spies? We've heard of the power of the Lord your God. So they're worshiping God, they're honoring God. Oh, what happens when God's first? Not only do we honor Him, but so does the world. And that keeps everything more in line. So, they're in Persia, they're in captivity, okay? And they're being ruled by a king with a powerful army. This king,
Serious or?
Ahasuerus,
Or Xerxes.
I never.
it's the same name. I was going to bring this up. Do you realize that it gets very confusing, these names, right?
Yeah.
Ahasuerus and Xerxes are the same person.
It's like Esther is Hadassah.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Who's Hadassah? That's Esther. You have a Babylonian name and you have a Hebrew name. Okay? It's like Daniel. We know him as Daniel, but he's Belteshazzar. Okay? Right? That's just the way it was. When you got taken into a different community, and Carol became xylophone. And that's what it was. That's how those things happen. So they're in this community. The king is powerful, and this king Ahasuerus, this king Xerxes, is not only powerful. What else is he? He's one of the wealthiest men on earth. Okay, he's the Bill Gates. He's the Warren Buffett. He's he's the Elon Musk. One of the wealthiest men on earth. Okay, and that was probably his downfall in a lot of ways, because we're going to walk into this in a minute and talk about what was happening here. But Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, was actually the third one that was in line from when these kingdoms started to be overrun and kingdoms were being captive. Cyrus the Great was his grandfather, and he was a great ruler at the time. In fact, they overtook the world under Cyrus the Great, and then Cyrus' son Darius the First ruled after Cyrus did, and then Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, was his son, and he continued in the kingdom. So all this wealth had come to him. He hadn't earned it as much as he'd acquired it. It was old money, if you will. Okay. But we get this story in here, and we're going to find this story. This story, there's some interesting things about Esther that are going on here. It's a time, again, of persecution. It's a time of people flexing their muscle and their power. It's a time where there doesn't seem to be a lot of devastation in the land, but communities are growing and things like that. And we'll find out a little bit more about them. But there's still an underlying message in all of this. And the message is seen, one of the messages that is seen as you read this story is the message of God's providence. What is God's providence? Big question, huh? Okay. God's providence is the power that he has to uphold, to guide, and to care for his creation. What's his creation? Everything. He created the world. In the beginning, God. His providence is still to maintain, to preserve, to create that. What would happen if God pulled his hand away right now? Yeah. Yes, we would. I would say if he pulled his hand away right now, creation would very quickly cease. It would implode, if you will. It would destroy itself. There would be total destruction.
I heard one of the science teachers from Biola explain one time that it's like God is holding all the atoms of the universes together.
Mm-hmm.
And if he were to stop that, everything would just like suck into a big vacuum and implode, disappear.
Mm-hmm.
A black hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
See,
yeah, you think about that and the energy and whatever in these little particles that we can't even see.
yeah.
One of the things that Marilyn Online points out is if Esther didn't happen, Israel probably would not have survived.
There wouldn't be a probably about it. See, this is part of God's providence, part of this message. God, here's the thing. God controls everything. People, whether they want to admit it or not, acknowledge it or not, God controls everything. If he removed the Holy Spirit right now, evil would reign and the world would destroy itself. Because there'd be no regulation. Okay? God controls everything, and man's will can't stop it or deter it. As much as it tries, as much as it says there is no God, as much as it says it's all about me, as much as it says it's science, and I believe that science proves God, just like God proves science. But not only can man's will not deter, but evil can't stop his providence. Okay? Now here's the thing to understand. If we really didn't believe in God's providence, we didn't believe in his power and his control over everything and his preservation of us and the fact that he is ruling, he is the governing body, if you will. Okay? It's just like it says in the New Testament, pray for your leaders because it's God who appointed them. He doesn't say agree with your leaders. It doesn't say like your leaders.
But pray for them.
But pray for them. Because God has appointed them. And it may be that they're there to be part of the force that turns us back to him. Who knows? But if we didn't believe in God's providence, prayer would be ridiculous. Because what are you praying for? You're praying to somebody who can't control everything. So why are you praying? Because there's really no answer. You see, if we just believed in us and our leadership, we're all bound to fail. Now, the other thing that we're going to find out here is there's this, again, I want to say a fancy term. It's a big word called concurrence. And it's just a fancy way of saying it happens because of God's order. It's like it says in Matthew 5 in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, God causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. It's concurrence. It happens because God said it's going to happen. And we want to try and interpret things and figure out things our way. And that's not what it's about. It's about us learning to, as believers, learning to listen to God and to be that example to a world that desperately needs his love. Before I get into Esther, I want to read a parable to you that really parallels this. Okay? It's just a couple verses. Just listen to the parable. It's something I think you know. But hear this. Here's Jesus talking. It says, what do you think? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, my son, go to work in the vineyard today. He answered, I don't want to. But later he changed his mind and went. The man went to the other son and said the same thing. He said, I will, sir, he answered, but he didn't go. Which of the 2 did his father's will?
First one.
The first one. Jesus said to them, and he's talking to the scribes and the Pharisees about this parable. Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, tax collectors and prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God before you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. Tax collectors and prostitutes did believe him, but you, when you saw it, didn't even change your minds then and believe him. God, this is a parable about obedience. And sometimes we all get our way. I don't want it. I don't want it. And then we go, yeah, well, that's the right thing to do. And after you have a little meeting with yourself, okay. I don't want to take the trash out.
Yeah, so hard.
You know what? I don't want to do the laundry. Well, then you know what? All you end up with is dirty clothes. And, there's things we do and there's things we don't want to do. So, we're coming to this story of Esther. And Esther is a story about really God's providence and God's hand in our lives. No matter what the circumstance, no matter how devastating the situation can appear. Okay? And it's a story that institutes a feast that is very important to the Jewish people. Have you heard about Purim?
I've heard of it.
You've heard of Purim. It's probably the feast that was listed in John 5:1, where it says, after this Jesus went to Jerusalem. There was a feast and Jesus went. It's never mentioned except for in the book of Esther. But this is probably the feast that they talk about. Purim means lots. And it has to do with the fact that this is the way that the bad guy in the story, Haman, decides to get rid of the Jews. He casts lots. Okay? And Purim is a feast of God's providence. Well, it starts with two things. It starts with fasting, and then it starts, as it begins, they spend time in prayer and then read the whole story of Esther. And then it turns into this huge party. For 2 days, it's a huge party. They give gifts. They do works of charity and community. They dress. It's just a huge party. And they drink, and they do all kinds of things. It's said in the Jewish community that you're supposed to drink enough during this feast to where it says, where when you hear cursed is Haman, it sounds like blessed is Mordecai. So you're supposed to be really drunk is what they're saying. Okay, now there's people that are going, Brett, why are you talking about this? Well, I'm just telling you what the feast is. Okay, that's what that's the end game of all this. But we have to get there through the story. And this story takes place in this kingdom in Persia. So let's read it. Let's start with a few verses. We're probably going to get through only 3 or 4 verses, and that's okay.
Where are you?
We're in Esther. Esther, keep going. It's after Purim. It's after Purim. Purim was just to give you some information in the book about Purim. Okay, we're in Esther, and I only printed out one Bible translation for this one. Okay, well, I take that back. I just to give it to you. For you guys that are here, I printed out the Hebrew.
Yeah.
I printed out and that's just to give it to you. But I'm reading from the Christian Standard Bible. That's what we're going to use for this study. Okay? So, your mask, you drop it right there. We'll get it afterwards.
Okay.
I just saw it fall. Okay. So, did you find it? Okay. Good. I got get through Purim, get through all the introduction stuff, and we're going to get to the story now. Okay, starting in chapter 1, verse 1. These events took place during the days of Ahasuerus, who ruled 127 provinces from India to Cush. Where's Cush? Do you know where Cush is? I'll show you on the map. It doesn't say Cush on the map, but I'll point it out. Okay? India is actually way over here off the map. Okay? Cush this is Egypt. Okay, Cush is way over here. Okay? Cush is further out than Egypt. Okay? Cush, today, you might know it as Ethiopia. Okay? This is the land that this guy ruled. He ruled a big area. He was the man. Ahasuerus, or Xerxes. Okay? He ruled from 485 BC to 465 BC. So this is in a 20-year period. Again, about just shy of 500 years before Christ shows up on the scene. Okay?
Where does it say when he ruled?
It doesn't.
Oh, okay.
I just know these things because I'm so wonderful and glorious. And I got smarts. I'm trying to give you, again, these things to me, they help me understand the story. It's like the map helps me understand. I'm very visual in certain things. It helps me understand. So he ruled from 45 to 465 BC. History tells us that. Okay, it says in verse 2, it says, in those days, King Ahasuerus reigned from his royal throne in the fortress of Susa. Susa is in Iran. Okay? That's where Susa is. So again, giving you perspective where he is. He's the man. He's in Susa. He's ruling from his throne. That means that he's not going out and conquering anything. He's sitting in his palace with all his wealth and having his servants do everything. So he's pretty established. He's pretty secure in where he is, okay? He held a feast in the 3rd year of his reign for all of his officials and the staff, the army of Persia and Media, the Medes, the nobles, and the officials from the provinces. So he called everybody in the world back to Susa. He called all the governors, all the town mayors, and he had the wealth not only to call them, but to put them up and to pay for them to be there. And he held a feast. Okay? He displayed the glorious wealth of his kingdom and the magnificent splendor of his greatness for a total of 180 days.
Wow.
So this just wasn't, let's get together and let's have a convention and we'll get together and have a couple of dinners and all this.
This is 6 months.
Well, and you got to think, how long did it take him to get there? If you're traveling from Ethiopia to Susa, and we don't just jump on a plane and fly 5 hours. So he had to put this word out probably a year in advance. So they were planning all this and building for all this for a long time. And then it was a 6-month party. And it wasn't just, so he was having to not only house these people, but feed these people and provide for them. Because they probably just came, they didn't pack a suitcase. They probably just came with maybe a change of clothes. That's the way it was back then. Now I'm going away for the weekend and I haul 3 suitcases out of the house because of my makeup. I'm teasing. Huh? And that's her big one, yes. No, that's what I'm saying is he was providing for everybody for 6 months, and it was a party. This was a party for 6 months, this feast. It wasn't just we're having a big dinner. No, every day was a celebration. Every day was something. Okay? At the end of this time, so after 6 months, at the end of this time, verse 5 says this, the king held a week-long banquet in the garden courtyard of the royal palace for all the people, the greatest to the least. So now he's brought in not only the nobles and the officials from the provinces and the army, he's bringing the town in too now. And these are probably people that had to do something to pull the feast off, but he's bringing everybody in. And they're going to have a week-long banquet. Okay? So, it's from the greatest to the least who were present in the fortress of Susa. White and blue linen hangings were fastened from fine white and purple linen cords to silver rods on marble columns. Gold and silver couches were arranged on a mosaic pavement of red feldspar, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. So, you see the opulence, right? You see the wealth. And he's making sure everybody knows how wealthy he is. And how protected he is. And how important he is. So, who's this about?
Myself and I.
Yes, it's about him. It's about him. This is the Achilles heel of leaders. They want to make it about them. They become too important. They think it's about them. And this is what this guy has done. And he's making sure everybody knows it's about him. So there's a lot of pride here. There's a lot of self-exaltation. Verse 7. I'm going to wrap it up with these couple of verses. and because I want to spend time talking about Vashti next week. Drinks were served in an array of gold goblets, each with a different design. So he had craftsmen working, and each goblet had to be different. Now, think about all the people. If you just count one for each province, that's 127. And if you count the army, that's probably 3,000. And then if you count the other army, that's probably another 1,000. And then you count the people that are in the city, you don't know. But I know this, at the end of the story, when the Jews go to battle against all these people, they kill 75,000. And so that's in a 20-year period, so that's probably a pretty good number. And so somebody had to make 75,000 different goblets. Wow. Talented craftsman, huh? I have trouble signing my signature the same way twice. It says, drinks were sold in an array of gold goblets, each with a different design. Royal wine flowed freely, according to the king's bounty. The drinking was according to the royal decree. There are no restrictions. Royal decree. You know what he said? You gotta drink.
Every time he did a toast, everybody had to drink.
You gotta drink. The king had ordered every wine steward in his household to serve whatever each person wanted. So they were making drinks. Queen Vashti. Here we go. We're gonna meet Vashti here. She becomes an important character quickly, and then she disappears. Okay, but Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women of King Ahasuerus' palace. This is just men. Remember, there was separation then. That was the culture. Men over here, women over there. Okay?
Men up here, women over here.
Well, that's true. That's very true. That's what the culture said. And we're going to see that in this story about Vashti and next week, okay? So I wanted to try and give you an overview of really a picture of what's going on and what they're looking at here, because that's important to this story. It's important to understand that this story happens in a short period of time in the grand scheme of things, but it's an important story for Israel, and if this hadn't happened the way it happened, Israel may not have been. So you see God's hand in all this. Esther is the only book in the Bible. It's the only book in the Bible that God's name isn't mentioned. And there are a lot of people that say, well, there was a lot of argument as to, well, it didn't belong in the Bible. But the message in here is definitely God's message. Martin Luther famously said of Esther and 2 Maccabees, I wish that those books had not been written because they do too much to Judaize. So he was very much against the book. He did not like Esther. Martin Luther. Okay. I think it's going to be an interesting journey, guys. And I hope we can make sense out of all this. I'm wanted to try and lay a foundation today to help you understand, the rest of the story, because it is a significant and important story. All right, let me get us out of here with some prayer. Precious Father, we're so grateful for your hand, that your hand is over us, your hand is on us, and you're guiding and protecting us, Father. And sometimes I forget to say thank you. I'm so grateful to you for just your protection, your providence, that you're patient and persevering with us. And God, and today, just help us. We need you desperately, Father, and may we as believers be able to reflect your goodness, your grace in all the circumstances that are going on. Father, I know the needs are great out there. The needs are, people are hurting. People are desperate. And when we're desperate, we sometimes make poor choices and poor decisions. May we be people that choose you first in everything that we say and we do. Father, be with us as we go and bring us back together safely. This we pray in your precious name. Amen.
Amen.